usual, I'm going to be pretty free-form and wander around the subject a little bit, but hopefully at the end of the day we'll both have a little more, we'll know a little more about it. Maybe I'll learn as I'm going along, as I'm thinking about it. I'll give you a little history of it first of all, because most of you have never heard of the Brehon laws. Some of you heard. Well, sorry, Kevin, you gave us a talk on it before, so you all do. You all have. But first of all, I'll tell you as best I can, real quick, the history of them, what we know about them, and how long they lasted, and then we'll get into what they are and if they have any relevance today. And what they are part is going to be the most interesting part, because I'm going to look at them from the point of view of social organization. You know, a set of laws defines a culture so much. So the fact that there were laws shows that there was a culture. It was not a lawless, barbaric, or a primitive society. It was a very highly organized system of laws, therefore a very highly organized society. So we'll examine them and see what it tells us about the society that relied upon them or used them. But first of all, how do we know they ever existed?
What period of time are you talking about, Patrick?
Well, I'll start with obviously the historical period. This historic period. Most historians talk about the historical period and prehistoric period. So obviously we only know the historic period. So the historic period, I suppose one could say, started with the Iliad. It's probably the Homer's Iliad and the Trojan War kind of thing, Western civilization. Pre-Christian. Pardon?
Approximately what years before or after Christ?
Well, the Brehon laws date back to the earliest civilization in Ireland. We know that they go way, way, way back. The adherence to them and their universal acceptance, many reasons why we believe that they were not a system that was imposed by an outsider. They weren't something that developed over a short period of time. They have all the characteristics of having developed over the period that the Irish people, whoever they are, the people who lived on that island, lived on that island. So there's every reason to believe that they are an integral part of the evolution of the people who lived on that island from the earliest times, which would be literally as far back as 10,000 years ago, which was when the Ice Age receded. So there's every reason to believe that they were as old as that. Now, but what I'm going to try and do is, very quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this part of it, the historical evidence for them is, and historical meaning the historical period. And I've got some bits and pieces of notes in here, but I'm not following any of this. It's just that I've got marked a few little pieces that will help me remember. As you know, the earliest manuscripts dates to the Christian period. So if the accepted date for St. Patrick was 432, we're talking about the 5th century and thereafter. So one of the earliest books that we have in Ireland is the Seanchas Mór, which was the first compilation of the Brehon laws. Seanchas Mór, Seanchas means old, like Shanachie, you know. So the name, just the choice of the name itself, and more, of course, is so. It's like Seanchas Mór would probably directly translate as the great antiquity, the great heritage, the great somebody has got the great immemorial custom. Yeah, but Seanchas in the Irish language and in the spoken language is the ancient wisdoms, and even down to my time, people would refer to things as a Seanchas, you know, as something which was old and accepted, and it was as old as the rocks in terms of it. So Seanchas Mór was the name of the book that was compiled at the very earliest Christian times. We don't know precisely when, except there's a very powerful tradition that St. Patrick had a hand in it, and may in fact have precipitated the writing of it. Now, so when you say St. Patrick, you mean the earliest Roman Christians, the ones who came to Christianize Ireland into the Roman system. And the tradition is that he expunged everything that didn't agree with the law of God. Now, of course, there's the law of God as interpreted by the Christians. So the Seanchas Mór would be pretty heavily redacted if in terms of what would have been gone prior to that. But nevertheless, the amount of stuff that was written down in the early Christian period is unbelievable. The amount of stuff that was written at the time. Unfortunately, as we were speaking earlier, it's written in Old Irish. There's Old Irish, Middle Irish, and Late Irish, and we only have a very tiny number of scholars who can read and translate Old Irish. Old Irish is generally considered to be the very earliest of the manuscripts written in Irish, which, as you know, became a written language. It's the first vernacular language to be written down in Europe, the very, very first language. So Seanchas Mór is the oldest legal tract in the world other than the Sanskrit, and is accepted by all scholars as that. So the Seanchas Mór is an extremely important book. Now, it sat dormant for a very long time until, or at least throughout the Middle Ages, and it was translated, or a fairly good portion of it was translated by Eamon O'Curry, who, if you remember, we talked about, and O'Donovan in the last century. The last century, in the middle of the 1800s, 900s. So O'Curry and O'Donovan, we owe a tremendous amount to them. Now, they largely relied on the work of Dóel MacThurbish, which I'm sure also you'll remember me talking about. So we really, and he, by the way, wrote in the middle of the 17th century. He was murdered in 1670 by a Cromwellian settler. I know the exact spot he was murdered on the road between Easky and Sligo, in Sligo. There's a little monument there. But so, unfortunately, it's only now that we're starting to develop some scholars who are beginning to attempt to roll back and to study the ancient Irish. And I don't know for sure, but I would guess there's probably no more than 10 capable of doing it. And I suppose the good news and the bad news. The good news is that there's large tracts in Trinity College, in the library in Trinity College, and in the British Museum, and in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Interestingly enough, on the British Museum, it was because O'Curry had access to the British Museum or the British Library, the tracks in that he got interested in that and learned how to do it. But I won't go into that. We did it actually last year or the year before. So the truth of the matter is that it still lies largely undiscovered. and unstudied. So even though we had this so-called Gaelic revival in the latter half of the 20th century, 1900s, and nobody really got into that stuff. So we're still very much not out of the colonial mindset of the British.